My mother kept trying to make me miscarry my baby, so I told my dad what she was doing at their vow renewal. I was 22 when I found out I was pregnant with my boyfriend Tyler's baby. We weren't married, but we'd been together for 3 years and living together for 1. When I told Mom over coffee at her pristine kitchen table, her face went white, then red, then back to white again. "You can't be serious," she whispered, gripping her mug so tight I thought it might shatter. "Tell me you're joking." When I explained that Tyler and I were excited and planning to get married after the baby came, she stood up so abruptly that her chair toppled backward. "This will ruin everything," she hissed. "Everything I've worked for. Everything our family represents." That's when the sabotage started. First, she invited me over for lunch and served me nothing but raw sushi, blue cheese, and wine. When I politely declined, she acted wounded. "Just trying to treat you to your favorites," she said with those manipulative eyes she'd perfected over decades. But I'd hated sushi since I was 12, and she knew it. The next week, she showed up at my apartment with a gift basket full of herbal teas. "For morning sickness," she explained sweetly, kissing my cheek like the loving mother she pretended to be. "Ginger tea," she'd insist, pressing steaming mugs into my hands whenever I visited. But when I researched the ingredients later, I found pennyroyal, tansy, and black cohosh scattered throughout the blends, all known to cause miscarriages. I started making excuses to avoid her visits, but Mom was persistent. She'd call daily with new workout suggestions. "You should try hot yoga," she'd insist during our morning phone calls. "Maybe some intense Pilates or CrossFit. Movement is so important during pregnancy." When I mentioned my doctor said to keep things gentle, she'd scoff loudly. Doctors are too cautious these days. Women used to work in fields until labor started, but the worst was when she started dropping by unannounced with increasingly heavy boxes. "Just some old photo albums for you to sort through," she'd say innocently, knowing I'd feel obligated to help carry them up to my third-floor walk-up apartment. Each box seemed heavier than the last, and she'd always find reasons why she couldn't help lift them herself. Tyler noticed first. "Your mom's acting really weird lately," he said, after she'd insisted I help her rearrange all the furniture in her living room during what was supposed to be a casual visit. "Doesn't she know pregnant women shouldn't be lifting heavy stuff like that?" I started declining more of her invitations, making work excuses. That's when she escalated to public manipulation. She showed up at my office with an expensive bottle of wine. "For after the baby comes," she announced loudly in front of my coworkers, drawing everyone's attention. But then she kept pressuring me to have just one tiny sip to celebrate. When I refused, she made a scene about how I was being overly dramatic and ruining her gesture. The breaking point came when I discovered the pills hidden in my purse after a shopping trip with Mom. Small white tablets I'd never seen before, tucked carefully into the inner zippered pocket after she'd borrowed my bag to get tissues. My hands shook as I looked them up online. Misoprostol, used medically to induce labor and terminate pregnancies. My own mother had planted abortion drugs in my purse. My hands trembled as I stared at those pills scattered across my kitchen counter. My own mother, the woman who'd taught me to say grace before meals and never tell lies, had secretly planted abortion medication in my personal belongings. The woman who'd raised me to believe family loyalty was sacred was actively trying to murder my unborn child. I called Tyler immediately, my voice breaking as I explained what I'd found. He drove straight home from his construction job, still covered in dust and concrete, and held me while I sobbed against his chest. We both understood this had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, but we needed undeniable proof before confronting her. The next morning, I started secretly recording every conversation with Mom. At first, she was careful with her words, speaking in coded suggestions and innocent-sounding advice. But as my pregnancy progressed into the second trimester and her desperation grew more obvious, she became increasingly bold with her sabotage attempts. During one lunch at her favorite upscale restaurant, I secretly filmed as she launched into her most vicious attack yet. "You're destroying your entire future," she said, stabbing her salad with unnecessary force. "This baby will trap you in poverty while your college friends are building careers and traveling the world. Tyler's not going to marry you once reality sets in. Men don't buy cows when they can get milk for free." The cruelty in her voice was something I'd never heard before. She continued her assault while other diners chatted peacefully around us. "You'll be a single mother living in some rundown apartment, struggling to pay bills while he moves on with someone younger and prettier. Someone without stretch marks and baby weight." When I tried to leave the restaurant early, she grabbed my wrist hard enough to leave fingerprints that lasted for days. "There are still options available, you know. It's not too late to fix this mistake. I know a doctor who could help you handle this situation quietly and safely. No one ever has to know what really happened." Her mask slipped completely during a phone call I recorded 3 weeks later. "I've been researching clinics in neighboring towns," she said, apparently thinking she was being helpful. "There's one about an hour away that's very discreet. They don't ask too many questions. I could drive you there tomorrow morning and we'd be back by evening. Your father never has to know what really happened. We could tell him you had a miscarriage." Dad, the one person in our family who might actually listen to reason. But first, I needed more evidence. I started paying closer attention to everything Mom did during our interactions. When she insisted on making me lunch during my next visit, I watched her prepare the food from the kitchen doorway. She added extra salt to everything, claiming it would help with my energy levels. But I'd researched enough to know excessive sodium could raise blood pressure dangerously during pregnancy. She kept pushing physical activities that seemed designed to cause accidents. She'd suggest we walk down the steep stone steps behind her house to see her garden, then conveniently need me to carry the heavy watering can back up. Or she'd ask me to help clean out the garage, knowing I'd have to navigate around paint cans and sharp tools while lifting storage boxes. The psychological warfare was just as calculated. She'd make comments about how different my body looked, how tired I seemed, how Tyler probably wasn't getting his needs met anymore. She'd show me pictures of my cousin who'd gotten married in a size 6 wedding dress just months after having her baby, then stare meaningfully at my expanding waistline. Most disturbing were the stories she'd start telling about women we knew who'd had pregnancy complications. "Remember how difficult things were for your aunt when she lost her baby at 7 months?" she'd say with false sympathy. "Sometimes these things happen for a reason. Nature has ways of correcting mistakes." I started avoiding her completely, but Mom escalated to showing up at my workplace. She'd bring gifts from my coworkers, establishing herself as the caring mother-in-law-to-be, then corner me privately to continue her campaign. She brought me vitamins that I later discovered contained dangerous herbal supplements. She gave me a pregnancy pillow that was too firm and positioned wrong, guaranteed to cause back pain that might lead me to seek medical intervention. The most sinister discovery came when I found her going through my medicine cabinet during what was supposed to be a casual visit. She claimed she was looking for headache medicine, but I caught her photographing my prenatal vitamin bottles and prescription information. Later that week, she called with detailed questions about my doctor's appointments, knowing information I'd never shared with her. That's when I realized she'd been tracking my medical record somehow. She knew details about my due date, my blood pressure readings, even my weight gain patterns. When I confronted her about it, she claimed she'd just been talking to other family members who were excited about the baby, but I hadn't told anyone else those specific details. The mystery was solved when I discovered she'd been calling my doctor's office, pretending to be me and claiming she needed copies of test results sent to her address for insurance purposes. The receptionist finally mentioned it during one of my appointments, commenting on how helpful it was that my mother was so involved in coordinating my care. I was horrified. She'd been intercepting my private medical information for weeks, using it to plan her sabotage more effectively. She knew exactly which complications to try to trigger based on my test results and risk factors. I immediately changed all my passwords and put strict privacy restrictions on my medical records. But the damage was done. She'd been one step ahead of me the entire time, planning her attacks with clinical precision. The breaking point came when Tyler found her trying to get into our apartment building by following another tenant through the security door. She claimed she'd been bringing us dinner, but the bag contained only raw meat and unpasteurized cheese. When Tyler refused to let her inside, she became hysterical, screaming about how we were keeping her from her grandchild. That's when I knew she'd completely lost touch with reality. In her mind, she was the victim being denied access to a baby she was actively trying to kill, but her next move proved she was calculating, not delusional. She started contacting Tyler's family, telling them I was having severe mental health issues and that the pregnancy was making me paranoid and delusional. She claimed I was accusing her of terrible things because I was having some kind of breakdown. Tyler's mother called me, genuinely concerned, asking if I needed help or counseling. She'd been led to believe I was having false memories and dangerous thoughts about harming people. It was a masterful manipulation. Mom was preemptively discrediting me in case I tried to expose her later. I realized then that this wasn't just about ending my pregnancy. This was about destroying my credibility entirely so that even if I survived her attacks, no one would believe me when I tried to tell the truth about what she'd done. That's when I decided to document everything more carefully. I started taking photographs of every gift she brought, every meal she prepared, every suspicious interaction we had. I saved all the voicemails where she suggested dangerous activities. I screenshotted every text where she pushed inappropriate medical advice. I also started recording video of her behavior when she didn't know I was watching. I caught her tampering with food in my kitchen, caught her going through my personal belongings, caught her making phone calls where she discussed my private information with strangers. The evidence was overwhelming, but I knew I needed something undeniable. Something so clear that even her masterful manipulations couldn't explain it away. That opportunity came when she invited me to lunch at her house, claiming she wanted to apologize for being overbearing and start fresh. I agreed to go, but I wore a hidden camera disguised as a piece of jewelry that Tyler had ordered online after we discussed the need for absolute proof. During that lunch, she revealed the full extent of her plan. She thought she'd worn me down enough to be honest about her intentions. "I've been thinking about our situation," she said, serving me a salad she'd prepared while I waited in the living room. "And I think we need to be realistic about what's best for everyone involved." She went on to explain that she'd been consulting with doctors about the various ways pregnancies could end naturally. She'd researched which medications could cause miscarriages without leaving obvious traces. She'd even contacted lawyers about what would happen to Tyler's parental rights if I died during childbirth. The casual way she discussed potentially killing me to solve her grandchild problem was the most chilling moment of my entire life. She talked about it like planning a vacation, weighing the pros and cons of different approaches. "Of course, if something happened to you, Tyler would be devastated," she said while carefully arranging flowers in a vase. "But he'd move on eventually. Probably marry someone more appropriate, someone from a better family." That's when I understood this was never really about the baby. This was about Tyler. She wanted him for herself, or at least wanted him available for someone she could control. My pregnancy was just an inconvenience standing in the way of her fantasy future. I excused myself to use the bathroom and called Tyler from my phone, whispering frantically for him to come pick me up immediately. Something in my voice must have conveyed the urgency because he left work without asking questions. When I returned to the kitchen, Mom had prepared a smoothie she insisted I drink for my health. After everything I'd learned about her methods, I knew better than to consume anything she'd prepared unsupervised. I pretended to sip it while secretly pouring it into a plant when she turned away. The smoothie later tested positive for multiple substances that could cause bleeding and contractions. She'd created a cocktail designed to end my pregnancy within hours, probably planning to comfort Tyler through his tragic loss, and position herself as the supportive mother figure he'd need during his grief. But I had it all on video. Her admissions, her planning, her casual discussion of my potential death. Evidence that no manipulation or gaslighting could explain away. Mom and Dad were renewing their wedding vows for their 25th anniversary. She'd spent 8 months planning every detail of the elaborate celebration, desperate to present our family as the perfect picture of success and tradition. Extended family was flying in from 3 different states. Dad's business partners would be there with their wives. The entire congregation from their church had been invited. But this wasn't just a celebration for Mom. This was her grand finale. She'd planned the vow renewal as the perfect cover for her final attempt on my life. With everyone distracted by the party, she could make her move and no one would suspect foul play when I had a tragic miscarriage during such a stressful family event. I only figured this out when I found the detailed timeline she'd written in her planner. She'd mapped out exactly when to give me the final dose of whatever she'd been planning, how long it would take to work, and how she'd position herself as the first one to find me collapsed. She'd even practiced her reaction, rehearsing the shocked grief she'd display when her daughter tragically lost the baby during what should have been a celebration of family love. The venue was a historic mansion with manicured gardens and crystal chandeliers. Mom had hired a professional photographer, a string quartet, and a 5-course catering menu that cost more than most people's cars. She'd even commissioned custom invitations with gold leaf lettering that took 2 months to arrive from Italy. The ceremony itself was genuinely beautiful. Dad looked happier than I'd seen him in years, as he repeated those sacred vows about protecting and cherishing Mom through sickness and health. She practically glowed in her expensive ivory dress, playing the role of devoted wife with Academy Award-worthy performance. Her sister stood beside her as matron of honor, dabbing tears from her eyes as the pastor spoke about the sanctity of marriage. During the cocktail hour, I watched Mom work the room like a seasoned politician, accepting compliments on her outfit and the venue decorations. She introduced me to distant relatives as her precious daughter, kissing my cheek and rubbing my growing belly for their benefit. "Look how radiant she looks," she'd coo to anyone who'd listen. "We're so excited about becoming grandparents." But I caught her watching me with calculating eyes when she thought I wasn't looking. She was waiting for the right moment to make her move. The hypocrisy made my stomach turn violently. I had to excuse myself to the bathroom twice to keep from being sick in front of the guests. Both times, Mom followed me, ostensibly to check if I was feeling all right, but really to see if her preliminary dosing was taking effect yet. I hadn't eaten or drunk anything she'd offered all evening, staying close to Tyler and only consuming things I'd personally watched the catering staff prepare, but she kept trying to get me alone, suggesting I rest in one of the upstairs bedrooms or step outside for fresh air. The dinner was flawless. Multiple courses served on fine china, with wine pairings for each dish that Mom had spent weeks selecting. She gave a speech about the importance of family traditions and commitment, receiving a standing ovation from the 100 guests packed into the elegant dining room. During her speech, she talked about the next generation carrying on family values and traditions. She stared directly at me while talking about the sacred responsibility of protecting innocent life. The irony was so thick I could barely breathe, but I knew what she was really like when the cameras weren't rolling. I waited until after dinner and the champagne toast when everyone was relaxed and slightly drunk. The band had started playing dance music and couples were swaying on the polished floor under twinkling lights. Dad was surrounded by his 3 brothers near the bar, laughing loudly at embarrassing stories from their childhood. His face was flushed with happiness and alcohol, his tie loosened and sleeves rolled up. This was my moment. If I waited any longer, Mom would find another opportunity to corner me alone and complete whatever she had planned. "Dad," I interrupted, my voice cutting through their laughter. "Can I speak with you privately? I need to show you something really important about Mom." His smile faded instantly when he registered my serious tone, and the phone clutched in my trembling hand. His brothers looked concerned, sensing the shift in atmosphere, but Dad followed me without question. We stepped into the empty coat room adjacent to the main reception hall, where dozens of expensive jackets hung like silent witnesses to what was about to unfold. The room smelled like expensive perfume and cigarette smoke from guests who'd snuck outside during dinner. Dad sat heavily in a velvet-covered chair while I pulled up the recordings on my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely navigate the menu. "I need you to listen to everything before you say anything," I told him. "This is going to be hard to hear, but you need to know what Mom has really been doing." I played them chronologically, starting with the mildest suggestions and building to the most damning evidence. I watched his face cycle through confusion, disbelief, mounting horror, and finally pure rage. The color completely drained from his cheeks as he listened to his wife of 25 years coldly plotting ways to end his grandchild's life. The recording of her researching abortion clinics hit him like a physical blow. He actually recoiled, pressing his back against the chair as if trying to escape her voice. His hands gripped the armrests so tightly his knuckles went white. When I played the clip of her admitting to planting medication in my purse, he made a strangled sound that was half sob, half roar. But when I showed him the video of her discussing my potential death as a convenient solution to her problem, he stood up so violently that his chair crashed backward into the wall. But I wasn't finished. I showed him photos I'd taken of the suspicious vitamins she'd given me, the dangerous herbal teas, the inappropriate foods she'd tried to force me to eat. I explained her pattern of trying to make me lift heavy objects, her attempts to get into our apartment building, her systematic theft of my private medical information. I showed him the timeline she'd written for tonight's event, her plan to use the vow renewal as cover for ending my pregnancy once and for all. "You mean she's been planning this systematically?" he asked, his voice barely recognizable. "For months? She was going to hurt you tonight?" I nodded and played one final recording. Mom on the phone with someone, discussing how she could make my death look natural so no one would ask questions. She talked about it like planning a dinner party, casual and matter-of-fact about ending both my life and my child's. She doesn't want Tyler to be tied down, I explained. She thinks if I'm gone, he'll be available for someone she considers more suitable, someone she can control. When the last audio clip ended, Dad sat in stunned silence for nearly 3 full minutes. I could hear the muffled sounds of celebration from the reception hall, laughter, music, the clink of champagne glasses. It felt obscene that people were dancing while we sat in this tomb of expensive coats, listening to evidence of premeditated murder. Then he looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. It was the face of a man who just discovered his entire life had been built on lies. She tried to kill my grandchild, he whispered, as if saying it aloud would make it real. She tried to kill you both. I nodded, tears finally starting to fall after months of holding them back. She's going to try again tonight, I told him. That's why she planned this whole event. She needs everyone to be distracted so she can make her final move. Dad stood up with frightening calm, straightening his jacket and running his hands through his hair. Stay right here, he commanded through clenched teeth. Don't move until I come back, and don't let her anywhere near you. I pressed myself against the coat room door and watched through the crack as he marched straight across the dance floor to where Mom sat at the head table. She was chatting animatedly with her sister about how perfectly the evening was going, gesturing with her champagne glass and practically glowing with satisfaction at her successful event. She had no idea her entire world was about to collapse. The band was playing a slow jazz number that had several couples swaying romantically on the floor. Guests were mingling happily, completely oblivious to the bomb about to detonate their celebration. Dad tapped his champagne glass with a butter knife, the sharp ringing sound cutting through conversations across the room. Within seconds, every face had turned toward him expectantly, wine-flushed and smiling, assuming he was about to deliver another sweet speech about renewed love and eternal commitment. The photographer positioned herself to capture what everyone assumed would be another tender moment between the happy couple. Instead, Dad pulled my phone from his jacket pocket and connected it to the venue's professional sound system with hands that moved with frightening calm precision. Ladies and gentlemen, Dad began, his voice amplified throughout the elegant ballroom. Before we continue this celebration tonight, I think everyone here needs to hear what my beloved wife has really been doing behind my back these past few months. Mom's face transformed from confusion to absolute terror as she realized what was happening. She half stood from her chair, mouth opening to protest, but no sound emerged. Her sister grabbed her arm, trying to pull her back down, clearly sensing disaster approaching. Wait, she finally managed to croak out. You don't understand. But Dad had already pressed play. Her own voice suddenly filled the room through the speakers, crystal clear and unmistakably vicious as she described ways to make me lose my baby. The first recording was relatively mild, her suggesting I try dangerous exercises, but the effect on the crowd was immediate and devastating. Collective gasps echoed through the ballroom, followed by shocked whispers that grew into complete chaos. Mom's 3 sisters stared at her with expressions of pure revulsion. Dad's elderly mother clutched her chest and had to be helped into a nearby chair by her sons. Several of her church friends looked physically ill, hands pressed to their mouths in horror. The pastor who just renewed their sacred vows looked like he might collapse from shock. He'd known our family for 15 years, had baptized me as a baby, and now he was hearing evidence that the woman he'd just blessed was attempting to kill her own grandchild. But Dad wasn't done. As each recording played, the crowd's reaction grew more intense. People were pulling out their phones to record the disaster unfolding before them. Others were quietly heading for the exits, unwilling to be associated with the scandal that would definitely dominate local gossip for years to come. Mom tried multiple times to interrupt, to explain, to minimize what everyone was hearing, but the recordings spoke for themselves. Her own voice, calm and calculating, discussing the best methods for ending a pregnancy without detection. When Dad played the audio of her discussing my potential death as a solution to her problem, several people audibly gasped and moved away from her table. Her own sisters were staring at her like they'd never seen her before. The photographer kept snapping pictures, apparently too shocked to stop documenting the disaster unfolding in front of her lens. Mom tried to run toward the exit, her ivory dress trailing behind her like a surrender flag, but Dad caught her arm in an iron grip that made her wince visibly. Not so fast, he announced loudly enough for the remaining guests to hear clearly. We're not finished yet. The room fell silent except for her labored breathing and the soft jazz music that continued playing, now seeming obscenely cheerful given the circumstances. Even the catering staff had stopped clearing tables, frozen in place as they watched the spectacle unfold. He played the most damning evidence last. The video footage of her discussing her timeline for the evening, her plan to use the vow renewal as cover for her final assault on my pregnancy. Her own face filled the large screens the venue used for displaying photos, showing her calmly discussing the logistics of murder. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the music had stopped, the band apparently too stunned to continue playing. By the time the final piece of evidence ended, more than half the guests had quietly left, unwilling to be witnesses to what was clearly going to become a criminal matter. Mom was collapsed in her chair, expensive mascara creating black rivers down her cheeks, her perfect image destroyed beyond any possibility of repair. Her sister was crying, repeatedly whispering, "I had no idea. I swear I had no idea," to anyone who'd listen. Dad's brothers stood in stunned silence, unable to process that their sister-in-law had been plotting to kill their niece or nephew. The few remaining guests sat in shocked silence, wine glasses forgotten, staring at the wreckage of what had been a picture-perfect celebration just minutes earlier. Dad calmly walked to the microphone one final time, straightening his tie and clearing his throat as if he were about to deliver a business presentation, rather than destroy his marriage in front of 100 witnesses. "Anyone who'd like to stay and enjoy the food we've already paid for is certainly welcome," he announced with bitter courtesy, gesturing toward the elaborate buffet that suddenly seemed grotesque given the circumstances. "However, this marriage renewal is officially canceled. Permanently." He set the microphone down with a soft thud that somehow carried more finality than any shouted argument could have achieved. Then he walked back to where Mom sat destroyed in her chair, leaned down, and spoke directly into her ear loud enough for everyone to hear. "You will never see our daughter or our grandchild again. You will never contact them. You will never come near them. If you try, I will make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of monster you really are." He straightened up and addressed the remaining guests one final time. "I apologize that your evening has been ruined by the revelation that I've been married to someone capable of attempting to murder an innocent child. I hope you'll understand that I had no choice but to expose the truth before she could complete her plan tonight." The aftermath was swift and merciless. Dad filed for divorce that Monday morning, the papers served while Mom was still in bed, recovering from what she claimed was a nervous breakdown. During the legal proceedings, my recordings became crucial evidence supporting charges of attempted assault, criminal endangerment of an unborn child, harassment, stalking, and conspiracy to commit murder. The local newspaper picked up the story within days, running it on the front page with the headline, "Prominent Local Woman Charged with Plotting to Kill Grandchild." The story included photos from the vow renewal ceremony showing Mom moments before everything collapsed, creating a visual narrative that the entire town found irresistible. She lost her prestigious job at the regional bank within hours of the story breaking. Customers were calling to close their accounts and threatening to sue the bank for employing someone capable of attempted murder. Her boss held an emergency meeting and terminated her employment effective immediately. The church expelled her from the congregation after an emergency meeting of the elders. The pastor made a public statement distancing the church from her actions and offering prayers for our family. The country club revoked her membership. The charity board she'd served on requested her immediate resignation. Within 2 weeks, she'd gone from being one of the most respected women in town to being a pariah that people crossed the street to avoid. But the social consequences were nothing compared to the criminal charges. The district attorney decided to prosecute aggressively, using our case to send a message about domestic violence and harm to pregnant women. The evidence was overwhelming. Hours of recordings, video footage, physical evidence of the medications she'd planted, testimonies from medical professionals about the dangers of her suggested treatments. During the trial, more details emerged about the extent of her planning. Investigators found she'd been researching methods for months, had contacted multiple doctors under false pretenses to gather information about pregnancy complications, and had even looked into hiring someone to cause an accident that would look natural. She'd been planning to kill me and make it look like a tragic accident, then position herself as Tyler's primary support system during his grief. The premeditation was so extensive that the judge upgraded the charges to attempted murder in the first degree. She called me dozens of times from jail before the trial, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails claiming she'd only been trying to protect my future, that she understood what was best for my life better than I did, that someday I'd thank her for attempting to save me from Tyler and single motherhood. But I'd moved 2 states away before my 3rd trimester, unable to handle the stress of constant harassment while trying to grow a healthy baby. Tyler found us a small apartment in a town where nobody knew our history. He got a job with a local construction company, while I worked part-time at a bookstore until the baby arrived. It was the first peace I'd felt in months, being surrounded by strangers who saw me as just another pregnant woman instead of the daughter of the woman who'd tried to poison her own grandchild. For the first time since my pregnancy began, I could focus on the miracle growing inside me instead of constantly watching over my shoulder for the next attack. My daughter was born healthy and absolutely perfect 6 months later, with Tyler's dark eyes and my stubborn chin. We named her Hope, partly because she represented our future together, but mostly because her existence proved that love could triumph over the most calculated evil. Dad drove 8 hours to be in the delivery room when she was born, tears streaming down his face as he held her for the first time. She was worth every sacrifice, he told me that day, his voice breaking with emotion. Every single one. The nurse taking our family photos commented on how much joy radiated from our little group. "You can tell this baby is surrounded by people who love her," she said, completely unaware of the battle we'd fought just to bring Hope safely into the world. Dad visits regularly and spoils his granddaughter beyond reason, constantly telling anyone who'll listen that she's the brightest light in his life, and he cannot imagine existing in a world without her smile. He's taught her to call him Papa, and she lights up whenever she sees his car in our driveway. Mom sends birthday cards every year that go directly into the trash, unopened. She was convicted and sentenced to 12 years in prison, though she'll likely be eligible for parole in 8 with good behavior. She'll never meet her granddaughter, never hold her, never hear her laugh or see her take first steps. Some bridges, once burned completely, cannot be rebuilt no matter how much time passes or how many apology letters arrive in the mail. According to updates Dad receives from the prosecutor's office, she maintains her innocence and claims I fabricated all the evidence against her. She's created an alternate reality where she's the victim of an elaborate conspiracy rather than a woman who systematically planned to murder an innocent child. The prison chaplain tried to arrange a reconciliation meeting, suggesting that forgiveness would help me heal from my trauma. I declined politely but firmly. Some wounds shouldn't heal completely, because they serve as reminders of dangerous people who can't be trusted. Tyler and I got married in a simple ceremony when Hope turned 2, surrounded by friends who'd become our chosen family. Dad walked me down the aisle with tears streaming down his face, whispering how proud he was of the woman I'd become despite everything I'd survived. In his wedding toast, he said the mark of truly good parents is their willingness to protect their children's happiness, even when that protection costs them everything they thought they wanted. He raised his glass to Tyler and thanked him for loving me enough to help me escape a toxic situation that could have destroyed our family before it even began. I think about Mom sometimes, usually late at night when I'm rocking Hope back to sleep after a nightmare or illness. I wonder if she genuinely believed she was helping me, or if she was simply terrified of what her church friends and country club acquaintances would whisper about her unwed pregnant daughter bringing shame to the family name. But those thoughts don't torment me the way they once did. Time and distance have given me perspective on what really happened during those dark months. Mom didn't act out of love or concern for my future. She acted out of selfishness, vanity, and a toxic need to control everything around her. She saw my pregnancy as a problem to be solved, rather than a miracle to be celebrated. She saw Hope as an obstacle to her perfect family image, rather than an innocent child deserving protection. And when she couldn't manipulate me into ending my pregnancy willingly, she decided to take matters into her own hands. That kind of calculated evil doesn't deserve forgiveness, no matter what DNA we share. My daughter will grow up knowing her grandfather adores her, that she has an extended family of Dad's brothers and their children who celebrate every milestone and holiday with enthusiasm. But she'll never know the grandmother who tried to prevent her from existing, who saw her as a problem to be eliminated rather than a blessing to be cherished. That's not cruelty, that's protection. And sometimes, the family you choose matters infinitely more than the family you're born into. Some people cannot be trusted with other people's lives, even when they gave birth to them. Some women who call themselves mothers are really just strangers wearing familiar faces, capable of unspeakable evil disguised as love and concern. My daughter deserves better than that kind of poison masquerading as family loyalty. She deserves to grow up surrounded by people who celebrated her existence from the moment they knew she was coming, not people who schemed in shadows to make her disappear before she could take her first breath. That difference ultimately made all the difference in the world. And every time I look at Hope's bright smile and hear her infectious laughter, I'm reminded that I made the right choice in cutting Mom out of our lives permanently. Some bridges are meant to be burned, especially when they lead to people who would destroy everything good in your life without a second thought.